And now I give the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam President. We're grateful to Undersecretary General Jean-Pierre Lacroix for his assessment of the current state of UN peacekeeping. We're grateful to the force commanders of UN peacekeeping operations in Darfur, Mali, and South Sudan for the updated briefings on the situation and their missions. We greatly value the efforts of peacekeepers in very difficult conditions, and we would like to pay tribute to all those who have paid the ultimate price for peace and stability. The security of peacekeeping contingents is an extremely important issue, and we need to focus attention to this not only during the preparation of peacekeeping operations, but throughout the period when peacekeeping operations are operating in the country. The type and character of the problems that we see in contemporary crises is constantly changing. Peacekeeping operations have to more frequently deal with the terrorist attacks against civilians and peacekeepers, with organized crime, illegal trade in weapons and narcotics. The situation in countries of deployment and each theater of operations have their own specificities. The increase in the threats that I just mentioned obviously leads experts and researchers to give serious thought to the concept of work of blue helmets, about their sequence of actions, or in a situation where sometimes it's impossible to distinguish fighters from civilians, or the inability by the host country to ensure the appropriate protection of civilians against these new threats. As a result of such reflections, we often hear the same kind of proposal or appeal, and that is to endow all peacekeepers with a robust mandate and additional capacity to collect information and to use force. Now, we heard similar ideas today already. Now, we believe that in such conditions, peacekeepers, quite to the contrary, need to be very cautious in their actions, because peacekeeping operations embody the ideals of the United Nations. Any mistake could lead to tragic consequences and undermine the authority and status of the organization. The Security Council, troop contributing countries, and the host state need to have an objective assessment. An assessment to what extent an expanded mandate for the use of force could make it possible to reach a true breakthrough in implementing the mandate of an operation. This is particularly important in light of the increase of victims among peacekeepers in the hottest crises and spots. Let's be frank. The experience of robust mandates of missions in the DRC and Mali so far is not particularly convincing. Furthermore, this experience has led to a number of questions, legal questions, technical, logistical, human rights, human resource questions. All of these require examination in an intergovernmental format by the specialized entities of the UN and with the direct participation of troop contributing countries. We need to be clear and realistic here. The inability to find a workable response to the root causes of conflicts and the threat of terrorism should not lead automatically to strengthening the mandates of peacekeepers on the pretext that there are no other options. There are other options. First of all, we need to be intelligent and thorough in planning mandates and the operational work of peacekeepers. We should not burden missions with work that they're not used to and that should be dealt with by specialized entities of the UN. Our attention should be focused on priority issues, supporting the political process, strengthening the national capacity of the host country, and ensuring security. I would like to hear how this planning that I mentioned in modern conditions is taking place. Furthermore, in preparing to conduct operations, it's important to take into account the views of troop-contributing countries and not to neglect or disregard the views and preferences of the local population. Part of that population might support armed groups, that's precisely what happened in the Central African Republic. Let's not forget that in such cases, the security of peacekeepers, civilians, humanitarian workers, and country team staff is threatened in such situations. Now, also another important factor is the proper training of blue helmets and ensuring them with appropriate equipment. It is unacceptable to create a situation where you have a robust mandate, whereas the conditions for their implementation is not possible to create for a very long time. And here it's important to touch upon the active security of contingents and also the issue of collection and analysis of information that my British colleague touched upon. We believe that this kind of activity can only be carried out within a framework agreed to by member states in accordance with the UN Charter, with the consent of the host government, and only for the specific aims of ensuring the security of peacekeepers and the civilian population. We cannot accept the use of intelligence gathering means or information for any other purpose, including to achieve the so-called political aims of the mandate. Madam President, I would like to in particular underscore the importance of strict adherence to the basic principles of peacekeeping, the consent of the parties, impartiality, and the non-use of force except for cases of self-defense and implementing the mandate of the Security Council. If we don't adhere to these principles in trying to find robust responses or preventive responses to virtual threats, peacekeepers could become directly drawn into conflicts. We, in particular, noted that in the statements of some of the briefers today, there were references to the Cruz report. As far as I recall, it was discussed by member states in the Special Committee on Peacekeeping in March of this year. However, it was not approved. Now, certain provisions of that report are quite questionable, and there are different views on them. We don't see any grounds to use its recommendations as a basis for implementation. We hope that Jean-Pierre shares that point of view, and we will be grateful to you if you could provide more information on this situation. We also believe that attempts by certain countries to promote, as part of UN peacekeeping, initiatives that were agreed outside the UN is unacceptable, agreed to by a small group of states. An example of such an initiative is the non-UN Kigali Principles on the Protection of Civilians. These allow the use of force against the host state. This will immediately transform blue helmets into a party to the conflict. A guarantee of the success of any peacekeeping operation is a constructive and effective cooperation with the host country, which bears the primary responsibility both for the political process and for addressing the root causes of the conflict, as well as for ensuring the security of its population, including protecting it from terrorist attacks. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the representative of Russian Federation for his statement.